welcome to Power Talks with Santosh Shah. In today's episode, we have with us His Excellency Thomas Gass, the Ambassador of Switzerland to Nepal. Switzerland is a dream destination for every tourist in the world. Switzerland is also a role model nation for many voters and electoral candidates in Nepal. Welcome to the show, Excellency.
Thank you, Mr. Shah. It's a pleasure to be here today.
Whenever we have election campaigns in Nepal, many of our political candidates promise to their people saying that they will convert or they'll develop Nepal into a Switzerland in 5 years. Do you see any reality to this promise that the leaders make to their people?
It's true that politicians have to be inspired, that they have to be inspiring, that they have to have a high vision, an objective for their country. And in that sense, there's no harm in being inspired by the experiences of other countries. But it's just an inspiration. Nepal has to find its own way. The politicians here have to build that vision on the strengths and the capacities of Nepal.
So let's say if Nepal has to develop into a country like your own, how many years are we looking at idealistically?
Well, I would say Nepal must not and cannot develop into Switzerland in the future. However, Nepal has to become the Nepal of the future. So, as I said before, whereas the inspiration can come from experiences from outside, really Nepal has to find its own way. Nepal has its own capacities, its own potential. Nepal can become a big exporter of hydroelectric power. It can become an exporter of agriculture. It is already, and it is an increasingly important country in terms of tourism, attracting tourism, and a high-quality tourism at that. Nepal can also increase its manufacturing and in some sectors. So there is a lot of potential there, and so the idea is not to become the Switzerland. The idea is to become the Nepal of the future.
I think that is what should be ideal for Nepal, is maintain its own originality, as you suggest.
Exactly.
Rather than following some dogmas of some politicians.
Yes.
Since Rana regime, even till today, we have been hearing often that people in power have stashed their money through corruption in Swiss banks. How real do you see this speculation?
The whole international culture about stashing away your money has evolved a lot in the last 10 to 15 years. Especially the OECD has placed a lot of pressure on certain jurisdictions to be more cooperative in terms of information about money in the banks. Now, for Switzerland, banking is a really important economic area, an important economic sector. And so for us, the privacy of the information, the privacy of the data that is related to the banking is really important. That is protected by our civil code, and basically the information about the money that you may have in our banks, that information belongs to you. It doesn't even belong to the owner of the bank. It doesn't belong to the state, to any state. Under certain conditions, of course, that information could be released, but it's not an information that is publicly available. Now, of course, for big financial centers, that poses certain risks, and this privacy of the banking information can be abused of, and can be abused of in crime and in money laundering.
So let's say the Anti-Corruption Commission of Nepal, which is CIAA, has to probe into an investigation to find out who has put their money abroad, earned through illegal means and through corruption. How will your government support this move taken by the Anti-Corruption Commission of Nepal?
Switzerland is actually very active in the fight against money laundering and cross-border financial crime. We are actively participating in the various international commissions that deal with that and that also establish rules and norms in that sector. This is a must for a country that wants to pride itself in its banking sector. It has to be active and has to be very disciplined, putting the onus also to some extent on the banks, agreeing to cooperate with other countries around the globe if there is a need for mutual assistance in the area of fighting crime related to movement of finances. So if there is a request, a formal request, of course that those requests are responded to within the framework, of course, of our federal act on mutual assistance in crime. If you look at what happened in the recent past in North Africa, where a number of leaders,
the dictators,
a number of leaders there had their assets blocked quite quickly in Swiss banks, actually before many of the other countries did so.
So if Nepal's Anti-Corruption Commission has to look into it, to what extent of time length can we trace back?
That is difficult for me to answer now. What I could say, though, is that one of the aspects is that the onus has to come, of course, from Nepal. That it's important to establish how those funds were acquired by the person, and of course, there has to be some legal proceedings that have to take place here in Nepal before Switzerland can consider or entertain any kind of mutual assistance in this regard.
The banks in Switzerland have a strong reputation in the world. It's most trusted. And let's say if we take another opportunity that Nepal maintains friendship all over South Asia and maintains a politically neutral position, can we not take some examples and technical support from your country in expanding our own banking sector all over South Asia?
I mean, we are a long-standing friend of Nepal in many areas, and for the moment, as far as I know, there hasn't been a very strong cooperation in the banking sector. I wouldn't exclude that that's possible. But let's remember that the banking sector has to also build on private sector activity. So there has to be a demand. This is not something you can just decide from the top. It's something that has to come from those financial institutions themselves.
From the grassroots.
Yes, and then of course it has to start with, I would say, cooperation where one exchanges one's principles and one's ideas, and when one gets to know each other, etc. It's not a cooperation where immediately one goes and asks for additional financial aid or something like that. So I would say that is not the... I wouldn't see the cooperation starting with that, let's say, with necessarily with foreign direct investment, etc. I would much more see it as a getting to know each other. But I know that some of the bankers in this country already have good contacts in Switzerland, good personal contacts, so I'm sure that could very easily be strengthened.
Switzerland has contributed to the development and growth of Nepal over the last 50 years. How do you see the outcome of your 50 years long investments in this country?
When I arrived here and was privileged to open an embassy in 2009 after 50 years of friendship, I think I had the easiest job any ambassador could have, is to open an embassy in a country where the links of friendship at the intergovernmental level, at the level of individuals, of foundations, is as strong as it is. For example, if I take the trail bridge sector, I mean, we've been in that sector for quite some time now, but over the last 10 years, we've built about 1,500 bridges and helped to repair about 3,500. Of course, when I say we, I don't mean we Switzerland. I mean we together with our partners in the government and the Ministry of Local Development and Dolidar, which is the entity that is in charge of that. Now, you've seen these pictures of the people hanging, the children, the school children.
It's very risky.
Yes, that's hanging from ropes every morning to go across rivers. I think the argument doesn't have to be made. I mean, over the last 10 years, for about 4.5 million people, we've reduced the access by 2.5 hours of them getting across those rivers and getting across in a safe way.
Trail bridges has been the most successful project in Nepal because considering the mountainous locations and rivers, that's one major way for people to cross over to another village or go to school, as you rightly said.
Exactly. So you speak school, for example. We have made impact assessments also on that, and we found that in the vicinity of the bridges, the attendance in school has increased by 22 to 27%, and the attendance in the health post, for example, has increased by 20%. We started in the 50s, 60s, with projects that were very classic, let's say, in our development cooperation. We were working in the carpet industry with a lot of Tibetan refugees. We were working in cheese manufacturing. We were establishing technical schools, etc. At a time in the 70s, we had about 100 Swiss experts working. Today, we have very few Swiss experts working in our development projects. We work with Nepalis. The capacity of this country to take forward its own development has increased tremendously. We can build on this capacity. Also, the government is taking more of a role in leading and in facilitating this development cooperation.
Since 2009, you have an interesting combination of your job. You head your development agency, SDC, and you're also the ambassador to Nepal. Does this combination of two different jobs complement your work, or does it just complicate it more?
It certainly gives me much more work. And my days are often very long, and my family complains that I'm too much in the office. Of course, on the one hand, I have to demonstrate through my presence and through my active engagement that my country is interested in the political context, in the events, in the processes which are organized in this country, and where foreign envoys are expected to participate. At the same time, I am responsible to the people of my country to manage a budget here of $25 million per year, and we pride ourselves in that this development cooperation is very value-driven, is very close to the field, and very practical, and makes a difference for the people in the rural, mostly rural communities, and that requires a lot of work. It would be totally impossible if I didn't have a very, very strong team, an excellent and very professional deputy, and also support, let's say, in other areas like in peace building, or, I mean, since 2009 we have a full-fledged consular section as well, delivering Schengen visas, etc. And so I have excellent staff. I'm really very proud of my staff.
We have noticed that you travel to the rural parts of Nepal yourself to oversee the development works. How has your experience been traveling to the real places of Nepal, outside Kathmandu?
One thing is clear. If you travel by plane, you don't see what is happening. It's only when you have to either walk or take a vehicle to go from one hill to the next that you realize that this country is much, much bigger than it looks just simply on a map. And I mean, the time it takes to get from one village to the district headquarters is huge.
Days.
So this country is, in reality, is much bigger than it looks on a global map.
And development becomes more challenging that way as well.
Development is extremely challenging. It also means that you cannot just go and see an end product. You have to realize what it means to build a road in a very steep area where landslides can happen and can throw you back for months, you know, when you just start again, you know. And this is the reality. You have to see also the reality of agricultural production in rural areas where people cannot get their products to the market in time, where they are completely dependent on intermediaries who negotiate the prices. Forestry is another area where we could talk for a long time.
You're also the chairperson for the donor group of Nepal Peace Trust Fund. Now that Nepal has changed from monarchy to republic and from conflict to peace, how will this change the modality of development cooperation?
Now, the more a country comes out, and Nepal comes out of conflict and into a period of solid peace, I would say, the more we can rely on the government to take its role as a service provider, as a facilitator of development. Not always necessary as a implementer, but more as a facilitator, as the one that ensures that the space is there for development to proceed. I would say that has changed over the last 4 or 5 years, of course, since the heightened conflict. It's more effective because we also have to build the capacities. We have to build the capacities of the state. The state in a normal country has to take a certain responsibility. And this is moving forward. It's not something that you can switch on or off. You know, it takes time, but that has certainly changed.
Something that has also hindered the development of the country and peace process is the frequent sub-downs and burns. And often these are caused with political interests by the group sometimes who are funded by the donor agencies. Does that not put the donor agencies at risk for supporting these kinds of groups and organizations?
Of course, development cooperation should not be political. It should not have such political strings attached to it, and that is something that we as a group of I would say Western development partners here in Nepal, we are very committed to that. But it's not always easy, because the line between politics and development is sometimes blurred, sometimes vague. You cannot have any development without peace. You cannot have any peace without development. And you cannot have any peace without human rights. And so these areas are interconnected, and sometimes we provide support to an organization because of the very crucial role it plays in delivering social and economic services, and because it is engaged in an area where the state shouldn't be engaged, because the state should not do everything. Sometimes such organizations then take position in a political question which may force us to take a step back from that organization.
Inclusion has been a hot debate and topic of interest of many larger population in the country in recent time. The issues with Janjatis, Dalits, Madeshis and women population and many others as well. And donor agencies have supported the growth of these marginalized groups. But will not the donors also get blamed for creating a divide, which sometimes we see the politicians talk about?
If you have a society that is very diverse and it has that is very compartmentalized, it's very difficult to avoid that wealth and power gets accumulated in one area. Basically, those who have already power and wealth get more and are reluctant to share with others. That leads to frustration, that leads to conflict. We know it from our own history, and Nepal has made this experience recently. That is a fact. The other thing is this: a country that is as diverse as Nepal in terms of its ethnic groups, in terms of its culture, in terms of its languages, is sitting on a treasure, is sitting on an unexploited treasure, which it has to unleash. So this country has not yet tapped, has not yet begun to tap into the wealth that it has in terms of its human diversity. And I think, you know, there's one thing to say, oh, we have to have women participate in politics, or we have to have women participate in the leadership of our political parties. So let's do it. Let's put a little quota there for so many parliamentarians. Let's make sure that we have at least one woman in this committee, or etc. That is compliance.
Yes.
That will only get you so far.
It's just a certificate.
It's only when you are really convinced and you really understand what the people can bring to the table who are different from you. That's only when you start unleashing the power and the potential of a family, of a community, of a village, of a country.
There's no debate that Nepal's bureaucracy, government, and even NGOs have got into corruption. We hear about it. The common people go through this. How do you ensure that the money provided to the government, to the NGOs in terms of development, does not get into the hands of corrupt people?
That's a difficult question. I mean, of course, and it's a question that sometimes gives me, to be honest, sleepless nights. I mean, as I said before, I'm accountable to the people, to the taxpayers in Switzerland who are giving their money because they feel that it's the responsibility of Switzerland to participate in the solidarity, in the international solidarity. We are a global village, basically, and we who have a bit more, we want to make sure that the people in the other parts of this global village can also benefit. Now, as the one who is responsible that money is well spent, sometimes I get a little nervous, to be honest, when I see what we all see in the newspapers about what is happening. So in our projects, we are extremely strict, and we have clauses that allow us to pull out and to stop funding as soon as we see that there's corruption. Of course, we try to use the national audit system, the Auditor General, but if we see that there are some weaknesses, we can add additional audits there. But that's just the money. That's just the money that we put, which is a very small part, actually, of the national economy. And we hope that what we do in our projects has some positive impact on the rest of what the ministries or the organizations are doing. But in general terms, that is very difficult. It is a responsibility of the people of Nepal to hold their own politicians and their own administration accountable. And it starts in the political parties. That's where you really see whether your friend in the political party has become very rich suddenly and has a few cars that you wonder with that salary how he got those cars, or those houses, or how come, you know, all his kids are studying in big universities abroad. That's where the first control mechanism has to happen in the society where you're close.
And the civilians can look into it and report also sometimes.
I guess. I mean, they are members of the party, and so they can do that. And then it has to happen everywhere. And this transparency has to be promoted. Now, I'm not here to blame. This is a challenge in any country of the world. And it's a challenge also in my country, and I mean, you see it in the news internationally. There are scandals everywhere.
We have many donors in Nepal. The development space is very large. We have more than 22 agencies of the United Nations, World Bank, IMF, ADB, donor agencies like your own and US, Europe, and now even it's the Asian donors now. How do you share the development space while working in the same country?
Firstly, it's not really up to us to share the development space. I mean, it's important that the government takes a role there in coordinating and in making sure that the different development partners invest and are active in those areas for which they have strengths. The Ministry of Finance has a special unit for coordination of foreign aid, which is doing that. We also meet on a regular basis, I would say, the Western bilateral development partners, including, and as well as some multilateral development partners. We meet every fortnight at the head of agency level to just discuss how things are going. At the sector level, we have even more frequent meetings that our staff dealing with health, dealing with education, rural infrastructure, forestry, meet frequently. We try to not make our own bureaucracy an additional burden for the administration in Nepal. We are aware that is a risk of development cooperation. We want to be aligned with the programs of the government. We want the government to take more of a lead, but that, as I said before, it doesn't necessarily mean that the government has to do everything itself. We believe that there is a complementarity there, not just in Nepal, in any country, where civil society has to take care of certain aspects, and the private sector has certain responsibilities, the state has certain responsibilities. Now, each country has to work out that mix in its own way.
When we talked of the expertise, it's known to the world that Switzerland's hospitality, education and tourism is one of the best in the world. How can Nepal benefit from Switzerland in these sectors, as we have strong potential in our own country with tourism?
The best idea is always putting yourself into the shoes of a tourist. Imagine that you are stuck in a local airport somewhere, and the flight is not coming immediately, and you have to go to the restaurant of the airport to spend 1 hour or 2 hours there. You go and do that, and you can see where improvements can happen. Of course, it has to do with cleanliness, with client orientation, with a certain predictability of the quality of the services, etc. Nepal has a huge potential in this area. I think it's on the right track. There's still a lot to be done. Of course, the other areas are more in the hands of the politicians, and that has to do with the peace process, with the bandas. Of course, Some tourists will find it exotic and maybe funny to be able to walk the streets without any cars, etc. But if you are stuck somewhere and you need to catch an international flight, it can be spoil your vacation. So, I mean, and that's why it was so important that this commitment had to be signed by all the political parties, not to have any bandas during this year.
There is a knowledge about the assets and the prospects of tourism that we have in Nepal. But how do we get the actual calculation of where this country can move ahead, in what speed and what dimension in terms of achieving its full potential of tourism?
You don't promote tourism at a desk with a computer. I mean, if you want to secure tourism in a country like Nepal or Switzerland, for that, you must make sure that your local population benefits from it and sees the advantage. I mean, for the Nepali citizens living in the villages, tourists must be more than just someone coming across with a big camera, and a large rucksack with a lot of porters, etc. They must get something from it.
Engaged.
Yes, I mean, these taxes that are levied all over the place, they need to come back into the villages. They need to help to strengthen the homestay, the capacity of the villages to actually have tourists stay in those. It's not so much one of achieving certain objectives, so many million tourists, etc. Of course, that is important, but it's more what kind of quality of tourism and what is the quality of the tourism and its interaction with the local population.
Your Excellency, it was wonderful having you on Power Talks.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you for being with us. We'll be back next week, the same time. Until then, good luck and goodbye.